Mr. Jordan, a returning star, is recognized.
I don't know about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Porcari, some members of both the House and the Senate have said that Mr. LaHood's dire warnings aren't backed up by financial data, where I was questioning you before, and they suggested that the FAA could instead cut $500 million it spends each year on consultants and $200 million it spends on supplies and travel. Do you think, and I know this is the FAA, but do you think that's something that we can focus on?
We could not achieve the savings that way, and I'll be glad to document why. Let me first point out what the sequester means. Two-thirds, basically, I'm sorry, three-quarters, 74% of our department is exempt from the sequester, which means that the sequestration cuts fall disproportionately on a portion of the department, primarily the Federal Aviation Administration. That 5% cut, because we're partway through a fiscal year, is equivalent of a 9% cut.
But my question is, do you spend $500 million a year on, does the FAA part of your budget spend $500 million a year on consultants and $200 million a year on supplies and travel? Yes or no? No, that's the point.
Those categories do exist. What are in those categories is important.
Let me ask it another way. Ms. Spear and I are working on a piece of legislation. We discovered this 2 weeks ago in this committee that we all remember the GSA junket to Las Vegas, where they spent $600 per day per attendee, $3,000 per attendee per conference. And if you use that as a benchmark, 183 times various federal agencies have exceeded that mark in various conferences they have attended. I'm not sure what the number was for transportation. I do remember defense was over 50 times that they had exceeded that benchmark. Do you guys have, in the past years, the Department of Transportation held conferences around the country and have folks attended?
We have, and we've dramatically scaled that back.
How many?
I'll be happy to get you the exact number.
Do you know if you were above or below the benchmark?
You
spend more than $600 per day per attendee, more than $3,000 per attendee per conference.
We stay within the per diem requirements.
We'll check. I bet we can get that information.
I'll be happy to get that for you.
If transportation was above or below the benchmark. Mr. Scovel, do you know?
Mr. Jordan, would you yield for just one second?
Happy to yield to the Chairman.
When you said per diem, that's how much the individual gets paid. What the gentleman was asking is about how much was spent. In the GSA scandal, it was not about per diem.
Mr. Chairman, what I'm referring to is also the per diem rate for hotels, where what people are spending on
How many conferences did you send Department of Transportation employees to last year?
I'll be happy to get you that. I will tell you that I have been personally reviewing and approving conferences.
You don't know that information? As much as it's been in the news, with the GSA, with the hearing we had 2 weeks ago, 183 times we've used that number, and you don't know that information?
I'll be happy to get it for you.
You come in front of the committee talking about sequestration, you don't know how many conferences you went to?
Because we've already achieved the savings we think we can achieve on the conference.
Well, maybe we would disagree with that, and we'd like to have that information in front of the committee.
I'll be happy to get it for you. That was
You might think you've achieved it, but maybe the American taxpayer doesn't. That's why we have these hearings.
We're happy
That's
to make
what it's
that
all
public.
about. Mr. Scovel, do you know how many times they went on trips?
I do, Chairman Issel requested that information from the Department. We have not audited it. I want to
but you know the number of trips?
That clear to the committees, most certainly. Fiscal year 2010, total cost $12,833,000. The number of conferences was 49.
49 conferences, $12 million, but we're going to have 90-minute delays because of this sequester, right? We're going to have to furlough FAA agents. That's the kind of stuff that just drives the American taxpayer crazy. And the fact that you know it, you know that information, and the agency head doesn't, is a problem.
If I may, the single largest FAA conference part of it, and that's the largest part of the department, is actually safety training for our air traffic controllers.
I'm not saying some of them aren't important. What I'm saying is it's $12 million and it's 49 times. That's something the American taxpayer wants to know. Let me move quickly if I can. Mr. Miller, do you know how many conferences you sent Department of Education employees to last year?
I'm sorry. It was roughly...
There's no roughly to it. There's a number. How many did you go to?
Yeah, no, we've got a complete breakdown by size of conference.
You know how many? Was it 10? Was it 49? Was it above 49 or below 49? Did you beat the transportation?
Below 49.
Below 49. Well, that's good. Ms. Teague, do you know how many it was?
I'm sorry, I do not, but I can certainly...
You know the cost that they had for travel and conferences?
I know that we reviewed the costs as reported to this committee in earlier submissions and to the Senate, but I don't have that off the top of my head.
Mr. Miller, do you know off the top of your head how much money the Department of Education spent on conferences and travel last year?
In total, I believe it was about $10 million. And our largest conference, which would be the Federal Student Aid Conference, came in at about less than $200
How many employees do you have at the Department of Education?
About 4,400.
4,400. How many employees at the Department of Transportation?
Approximately 55,000.
55,000. They spent $12 million. 4,400. You spent $10 million? Maybe you weren't better than me. That's amazing. And here's the point. Instead of having the secretaries of these respective federal agencies out scaring the American people, maybe cut back on the conferences, maybe actually achieve some savings for the taxpayer and do things the way you're supposed to. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. We now recognize the gentleman from Northern Virginia.